It is. We can go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead, Pastor, and get us started. So,
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. It's nice to see familiar faces. And yeah, let's open our time together with a prayer. The Lord be with you.
and also with you.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we thank you for the gift of today, for the sunshine and the promise of spring and summer to come. We ask that you be with us today, that our hearts and ears be open to hear as we learn and discuss together our shared history of this place over the years. We love you and we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, here we are. This is session number 4 of hopefully 8 sessions to go to, and we're all pointing toward hopefully that 8th session of happening of actually going to Lutheran Church of the Wilderness and celebrating with them. So we've had some introductions. So we have a couple new people. So why don't we go ahead? Chris, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself? You have to unmute.
My name is Chris Anthony, and I think a lot of you know me. I'm a long-term member of Trinity, was born and raised in the Lutheran Church in Iola, and raised our family here in Wapaka, and I have been involved with this kind of discussion series with a lot of these folks since we locked down probably 2 years ago. So, and I have really, really enjoyed it. And right now I'm in Florida. So
Happy birthday yesterday.
thank you.
Okay. There's a little secret. Charlotte?
I'm often called Charlotte, but the name is Claudette.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
Put my glasses
Claudette
on.
is just not as well known, I guess. So I answer to Charlotte all the time.
Okay.
I'm one of the co-chairs for the Synod Global Mission Team. And so I did finally get to the last session. I really wanted to get to the first 2, but wasn't able to. So the team has been working on this idea about the need for developing relationships among our Indigenous peoples within the state. So it's been a lot. We've had a lot of discussion. We've, as a team, listened to a lot of information, and we've done our own kind of footwork with reading and trying to understand and learn more. So I'm interested in what you as a congregation have begun, because this is important work in our synod and has been for a long time, just not been well developed. So thank you for initiating, at least with Church of the Wilderness, a relationship, the one church within our synod that is an Indigenous church of the ELCA. So yeah, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for your work, and we'll take this information to a meeting on Tuesday of the team, and we're going to be right there in Wapaka at your church. So any of you who are participating are welcome to come to our meeting and sit in on. It will be there from 10 to 2, and at that time, we're going to be spending quite a lot of time on kind of some reorganization for the team. And one team will be specific in part to developing this Indigenous relationship. So long, yeah, kind of forgotten. So come sit in with us and yeah, see what we're up to. We'll welcome your input. Thanks. I'm glad I'm here.
Would you repeat when that meeting is again?
It's Tuesday, this coming Tuesday from 10 to 2, right there in Wapaka at Trinity.
Oh, at Trinity. Okay. So
If you're interested in coming, it would be helpful if you would let me know, because we have to plan for a lunch over the kind of lunch hour, which is only a half hour. But let me know, or someone at the church who can then in turn let me know. So.
okay, thank you. Oh, and then we have Pastor Zemer joining us. So do you want to introduce yourself again a little bit and how you are connected to this whole idea?
Oh, good to see all of you. Claudette, it's been a long time to seeing you. So you're speaking specifically about Church in the Wilderness. Is that right? My connection? I
Right,
served,
that's one of the
Yeah.
things, yeah.
right, I had served in Marion, not far, and they were at our same conference, so we did a lot together during that time. Joel Schluchtenhofen, Stephen Schreiner, then his wife Melinda were pastors there. A lot of exchange of pastors, Lenten services. So came to appreciate them deeply. My greatest joy, Claudette, you might, I don't know if you were there in 208, I believe. Small group from South Africa came so we could tour them around our synod, sort of an introduction to our synod, and we spent a day at Church of the Wilderness. And those two groups really connected deeply, and especially realizing very Christian, very Lutheran, but finding new liturgies out of their specific indigenous background that really capture the essence of their culture and identity in ways that from our European background are different to us, but very enriching for us to see how that expounds and the richness of Father Creator, and especially Spirit, are two of the things that they share much more than we from our European background.
Okay, thanks, thank you. Nancy, and then Nancy, I see that you're making apologies for Mrs. Hike, so she can join us and we'll view it later. So a lot of good ideas and inputs here too. I will be going up to Lutheran Church of the Wilderness and the museum Wednesday. I'm going to spend my whole morning up there. Trying to just, again, establish that connection a little better and taking up some books that I have and trading off and maybe talking about learning more. There's always more to learn. So I'm about ready to begin. Any other questions or? Now I've had really technical challenges with my videos. So if they work, fine. If they don't work, well, I'll fill in. So let's start the slideshow from beginning. Again, here we are. As I said, we're on session 4 to do this too. And the last one on the 15th is intended to be a get together with Lutheran Church of the Wilderness. Some of you haven't been here for a little bit, so review what we've done in the past, in terms of that. Again, to talk about the whole idea of what this is about. And it's exactly what a couple of you have already supported, the idea of developing relationships with our Native American siblings. Kind of, I look at this as an incubator kind of a thing. There's not any a great thing that this is going to do, but hopefully it's planting seeds or incubation, whatever term you want to use for it, the start of something. It may be better. So we have gone a lot into the history of what has happened to Native American people in their interactions with Europeans, over the years. And that's one of the cornerstones of this, was to try to develop a history. So we all kind of have to use the same kind of history and the same kind of language and those kinds of things to see where we are today. Today is more going to be a focus on today. Contributions of our Native American siblings, I guess I would say, building on that, up for today. And I'm going to take a look a lot at what Native Americans have done in the past, especially in warfare, which is interesting because, again, we have these dual, I think, almost misconceptions. The Native Americans are barbaric tribes, but they're also really good fighters, in terms of that. The warrior idea, we even use those in some of the, mascots and those kinds of things that have been out there. So I'm going to dwell a little bit on that, but then also kind of end up talking about Native Americans today and the contributions they're making. So hopefully next week we'll have a speaker from a Menominee Nation. I'm still working on that one. So Okay, again, this is where the red is where we were, what we've talked about quite a bit in that doctrine of discovery. For those of you that are not familiar with that, it all started with the Pope saying that everything in the Americas belongs to the Spanish, and the Europeans kind of had taken that on, the idea of that all this land was for the taking, and if any people get in your way, these Indian people, do what you need to do with them, but maybe Christianize them also too. And we also listened to the Muncie Stockbridge last week. So this is kind of a collage of Native Americans. They are citizens. In their mind, they've always been citizens of our country, even though our governments have not always recognized them as citizens, and they've gone through a lot of morphing of that citizenship. But one of the things that throughout history, they have very much been saying that this is our land, this is our country now, to do too, and we will fight for the freedoms and rights of our country. So all the way back through Geronimo and Chief Joseph, all the way up to today. And interesting, in the American Revolution, that one of the reasons that the colonists were effective is they were taught the hit and run tactics that Native Americans used. They were vastly outnumbered. They were outgunned, by the European settlers, but they were very, very effective fighters, in terms of that. So the wise colonists, generals and so on, used those kind of tactics too, because again, they were very much outgunned and out by the British. On the Civil War, which is stuff I find, they fought for both sides, of course. If they were in the North, they fought for the North, and if they're in the South, they fought for the South. But again, the idea that this is their country and they were going to be part of this. And a little known fact I didn't know, that General Grant's adjutant, he was a Seneca, and there he is, Colonel Eli S. Parker. He wrote the terms of surrender at Appomattox to do it too. And he became a general, and he was later commissioned of Indian Affairs. Very, very effective leader for General Grant. And then down below, there's a Stan Waite. He was a Cherokee that was a brigadier general in the Confederate Army. So here we got Native Americans, being leadership. In World War I, there were 17,000 over that served, even though half of them weren't recognized as citizens, but they still accepted them in the Army. And there's another thing I didn't realize is that the code talkers didn't start in World War II, started in World War I. They used them, the Choctaw were used as for military code. And since they were very skilled and courageous, they were given dangerous assignments, and their death rate was twice that of the rest of the Army because of the assignments they were given. You can also read other things of that if you want. Then after World War II, there was a lot of involvement in World War II by Native Americans, and there was a GI Bill, and there it is, President Roosevelt signing that in, which is a good thing to do too. And the good thing was that it now opened up higher education to the Native Americans. Well, the bad thing was, though, they couldn't get bank loans, even though people off the reservation could, because there was this technical waiver they had to sign because the land was supposedly federal land and it was held in trust. And they would not sign off on that. The BIA would not sign off on that. So all these people coming back from World War II couldn't get loans for housing for their own. So that was not a good thing. So the GI Bill was both good news and bad news for Native Americans. So now the code talkers, I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I have a video here. This is actually one of the code talkers, talking about that. And there's a wonderful movie out. I recommend it. And I'm developing this list of resources where people can go back. And there are some movies that I'll put on there. And this is the movie for the code talkers is really, really good. But hopefully this video will work because it's really interesting of how this worked. Oops, no, it didn't work. Okay, let's go back. There we go.
200 Navajo code talkers participated on the land of Wachee.
Could other people hear that? I could not hear most of that.
Oh, okay. Probably forgot to do something.
So I think so I think the way that if you like stop sharing your screen, if you start
Right.
again on the bottom left hand side, it says like there's a box you can click to like optimize for video clips or something like that. We had this problem. in
Read the
Visual
whole
Class.
thing. We could read the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Just for if you have other
Yeah,
videos.
we
to
have
share
future
today.
ones. Okay. It's not under mute, is it? Audio
So,
settings?
so when you go to share your screen, right, the green
Okay.
button,
Okay.
then it'll say you can click to share sound and to optimize for video clip on the bottom left hand.
All right. Yep. Sorry, I forgot.
It's all right, it happens. Pastor Andy forgot yesterday, so
Okay.
happens
Well,
to all of us.
I think that the last part of it, I almost like to play it again because I think the last part which shows the dedication so I'm just going to play the last part again.
Over 200 Navajo. Those guys, that's how critical Navajo Code was to the war in the Pacific. And we should never forget what war is. War is something that nobody wants. It's bad, it's ugly. But so long as we are together, no matter what nationality you are, if you are American and love this country, we all have to stick together to keep this nation strong. Our freedom and liberty means so much, meant so much for those who never made it home. So it's up to us now to keep this nation strong and prosperous.
Yeah, I just wanted everybody to kind of hear that because I think it's so, it fits so much of what's going on right now in the world, in terms of it. So, and I wanted you to be able to hear the passion in this gentleman's voice, for that. And I find that a lot in that, to me, it's amazing that Native Americans have such a dedication to our country in spite of the history and in spite of even the situation today. Any reactions or questions?
One of my students did a term paper on the Navajo Cold Talkers, and because I have special ed, I really had to help them a lot, and it was very interesting.
Okay, and so that was a special talent it has, and it is interesting because when you watch the movie, it's so interesting because the Japanese have no clue what this is, because this language, it is. And I've worked with the Navajo, which I'll talk a little bit later, and I gave up trying to understand the language at all. It's such a different language from any of the Latin languages or even the European languages or Chinese even. This is much more complicated. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to sharing. I'll make sure that the should be optimized, I think, still. So let's see, let's go on to this one. And hopefully the video will work. Because, let's see, slideshow from current slide. Oops, didn't want to move it, but no, I moved it. Hopefully, this is interesting because I don't know if the video will work, because I had a lot of trouble with this one because I had to do it. I have to do it from YouTube to connect, and so I don't know if it's going to work or not. No, let's go back. But it's about. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's now here. Maybe it'll work. These are veterans today. These are women who fought in Afghanistan. You know, in terms of it. So it's kind of their testimony. So we'll see if it works. Apologize, it's off the corner. Can everybody hear it? Yes. Hear the wind blowing? Good.
To me, Navajo is my homeland. This is where I call home. Just the beauty of everything that is around me, in front of me, beside me, behind me, under me, and above me. This is where I call home, and this place will always hold my heart. Istana Nishle, Istana Dine Nishle. That means I am a Navajo woman. When I grew up, inside me, I feel like I had this warrior spirit, and I feel like I've always carried that for me. And to represent my family and to represent my community as a Native American, I'm a woman, I can be a soldier just like everyone else. And I feel like when I say that, compared to a male that's next to me, they take him more serious. Why? I was out there with them, getting hit by IEDs. I was shot at numerous times. We were there too. So I want to tell everyone we're here. We're just like everybody else. And I don't want to be left behind. They always say no soldiers are left behind. Don't forget about me. Don't forget about my sisters who've served also.
Women veterans in general, we're there. We've helped in so many ways. Navajo women veterans, we have a proud history. We've made the sacrifices as everybody, but a lot of times, you know, we don't come back for the recognition. We just come back and what is our job? Our job is to go ahead and make sure our family's taken care of again and those type of things. So we don't sit there and seek out recognition. With that, sometimes they lose their benefits, you know, not realizing that any of the hardships they have, they could, with their time in service, they could get some type of benefits or some kind of relief from that.
When I first came back home from active duty, it was very different because I feel like just life in general here is very slow. So it was a huge transition for me. And a lot of people here too don't really understand what you're going through and what services you need to help you realize I do have PTSD. I didn't know that there's counselors available, and I didn't really understand PTSD. I used to think I can't have it, like that's for like soldiers from like Vietnam. I didn't realize that nowadays a lot of younger soldiers, we can get PTSD. So when I moved to the city, to Albuquerque, New Mexico, they have a bigger veterans hospital. I found those resources there. And that's when I was diagnosed with PTSD. And it took me to leave the reservation to go to a bigger city and a bigger veterans hospital. I went and found the military. I went and found the Navy. I went and found the Army. And why can't they find me?
Another kind of powerful witness, I think. Again, a group of people you wouldn't even think about, Navajo women working there. And I thought that last statement was very powerful. Why can't they find me? And when we talk about what we can do as a church in developing relationships, that's one of the things. For example, Trinity is a rich congregation, not in just terms of money, but in terms of resources and connections, and people like Pastor Zemer that does lots of seminars and those kinds of things to do too. So we have such a potential to develop relationships, with our Native Americans to do too. It shouldn't be just one-sided. There's a lot they can offer, also us too, in learning about our past and situations. But I'm going up to next on Wednesday, and it's 45 minutes. But it's almost like another world, in terms of it. So, questions, comments? Must be sunk in pretty heavily, in terms of that. Do too. The Navajo too is another one. I just don't want to give you too much on there to do too, but I have a history with the Navajo to do too. When I was in the Education Association, the ELCA, I developed a project called Developing Centers of Wellness, which Trinity's preschool could be a center of wellness. It's a program that's for schools and preschools at ELCA. And I needed to have pilot schools to try it out. And I figured, okay, we need to have vastly different ones. So one of them was a very wealthy congregation in Chicago, and the other was the mission school that the ELCA has in Rock Point to do too. So I went there and spent a lot of time shooting videos and interviewing people and so on. I came to appreciate how, again, and we're talking about how we can develop relationships with that. There's a church in the Phoenix area that has developed quite a relationship with the Navajo Mission School. And the Navajo Mission School, one of the things that when I was on their advisory board, is we had a transition away from having white leadership lead that just to empowering the Navajo themselves. And they basically, except for the executive director, who's a pastor, they really haven't. That's another thing, a whole other thing we can talk about is how can we get more Native American professionals, pastors and deacons and all those kinds of things to do too. So I'm going to try to share a video, see if it works, about that school and the church that works with them in Phoenix. So, okay, share sound, that should work. So it's this one. And we'll see if this video works. Yes, it's working.
Hello, I'm Kate Adelman, and I'm the Executive Director and Pastor of Navajo Evangelical Lutheran Mission in Rock Point, Arizona. The mission has been around for 68 years, and it seeks to meet the needs, the cultural, the spiritual, and the educational needs of the Navajo people living in Rock Point. The campus consists of a church, house of prayer, a cultural center, a mission office, apartments for guests, and a school, a K through 2 school, Navajo Mission Preparatory School. For the Navajo people living on the reservation, 40% of them do not have running water or electricity at home. And they live in multi-generational households. So it's difficult when they don't have enough water, enough food. The children don't have internet access. It makes life a little bit harder than what we experience. Since March of 2020, our school has needed to provide breakfast and lunch for all of our students and their siblings. And we've had to deliver school assignments in packets, hard copy packets, because the children don't have internet access at home. And during the past year, we have acquired Chromebooks, and that has been a really good deal because the teachers can now load an assignment, have the Chromebook charged up and ready to go out. The kids do their assignments. They bring the Chromebook back when they're coming back from delivering meals, and then the pattern starts over again. But the kids are getting to interface with digital access without internet access, which has really been good. Well, the well project began in January of 2020. The well had been capped and shut down many years ago, and the people need the water so badly that we were committed to reopening that well. As it turns out, we weren't able to open that well, but we drilled a new well beginning in March of this year. And now we have lots and lots of water coming up out of the ground from about 600 feet. There was so much water pumping up out of the new well that it flooded our entire campus. So then we had to build dikes, and we threatened to get boats and go fishing, but it's really been a privilege, and the community is so excited about having access to this water.
Here we are, water sampling.
Good, right?
Everybody says it's really good water.
It's pretty darn good. Pretty good.
So the next steps of it are the construction or the addition of the pumping equipment itself, a big holding tank for water, and then the delivery system, how the water is going to be delivered to the people when they come to pick it up. All of us at the mission want to express our appreciation to Shepherd of the Hills for all the support and encouragement you've given us for years and years. You may not know it, but for 20 years, members of this congregation have been coming up to the mission, participating in building projects and painting walls and helping at the school and doing all kinds of things that interacting with the Navajo people, that's the most important part. And we've been able to share a lot of life together. Along the way, you've collected a lot of shoes that we have shared with the community up there. And today we're here to pick up 100 packages filled with Peeps and Easter bunnies so that the kids can have something special this coming Easter. They are so excited, and they have said to me, "Hurry up, get back, we want Peeps, we want Peeps." They don't actually know that Peeps are my favorite thing, so they might not make it there. You never know. It's been a while since we've seen members of Shepherd of the Hills at the mission. First, we've all experienced COVID lockdown. We are still in lockdown up there, but we want you to come and visit us as soon as possible. Parker and I have come here several times and experienced your hospitality, and one time we were here and this whole patio was filled with tables in a mission festival environment, and we were grateful to be a part of that. And now it's time for you to come and visit us, to see the well, to see the children in the school, to go to House of Prayer and watch community members come one by one to receive their special meal each day. It so richly blesses the community to have a congregation, a small little congregation like ours, be able to provide a daily meal Monday through Friday for their community friends and neighbors.
Okay, so that is an example of Kate Alderman, by the way, I know really well, and the guy in the sunglasses, that's Parker, that's her husband. They've been really working. That's an ELCA congregation, House of Prayer, that's on that. So we have kind of a parallel with Lutheran Church of the Wilderness, going. But this is a congregation that has found a way to help. And one of the things is digging that well was a really, really big deal because it's an arid environment. It's about 6,000 elevation. So it's not quite the hot desert, but it's still very dry there, as you can see by looking around. It's interesting, one of the things when I Zoomed with the kids there, when I was working on that project, the first thing they looked at with my screen, because I was behind me was my window, they said, "It's so green there," to do it too. So, so a question I would have is planting that seed again. How do we go about developing that kind of a relationship with Lutheran Church of the Wilderness? What would you see? How do we go about that? Anybody have any ideas? This is kind of brainstorming. There's no wrong answers here.
I would say the first thing we have to do, at least for me, is to really get to know more about that culture and that church, and then, build a relationship, and then moving forward, maybe have a brainstorm session with them as to, what are their greatest needs. I don't know that. And I would guess that a lot of the people at Trinity don't know that. And what we don't want to do is have us say, we think you need this.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, I don't think that water is a big need there.
Probably not.
In terms of, but yeah, and I think that's really wise, Chris, in terms of doing that. And that's one of the things when I go up there, I'm just going to say, what are your ideas? And let them just brainstorm to us, because, and I think I want to keep it a two-way thing. I said, what can they do also for us, in terms of that? So that's one of the things why I'm going up there, this Wednesday. So if you have any, after we sign off, if you have any other suggestions, send me an email, with questions. Other people have ideas? Anita?
I'd like to suggest that we go as a group to the powwow that you've talked about, that second week of August,
Mhm.
and that we identify ourselves as a group, who we are and why we're there, and then ask somebody to come visit us and tell us what we saw but we didn't understand. And let us ask them questions about why did the drums play this time but they weren't playing that time? Why do sometimes men and women dance together? Why do sometimes they don't? How early do the children start learning this? Blah, blah. What do the feathers mean? What do the outfits mean? We don't know any of that, and that's a way they could share and tell us more.
Okay, good idea. Nancy?
I say just looking for social events at either of our churches, times for people to just kind of get to know each other, and especially the kids too, and not be a real educational thing other than learning as you go and starting to form relationships that way, inviting them to things that we do at Trinity in both ways.
And I think kids are really part of, I think, of that, because of course that's, you always talk about they're our future, in terms of it. And one of the things that I found that when I took my class up there and they wrote that book, it by interviewing elders, it instilled in them a respect for their own elders, and they came back and wanted to talk to their grandma and grandpa and talk to their aunts and uncles about their own family history. So I think that's the kind of thing that we want to instill, us like me, who are in this older generation, we're not going to be around much longer, in terms of that, but hopefully the future of the congregations, will be doing. So other questions, suggestions? I've got two good ones. I'm writing them down.
If you haven't yet worshiped at Church of the Wilderness, I'd certainly encourage you to do that. Fill a couple of carloads and go on over for a worship experience. I know that I attended one of the finest Bible studies following a worship service in that church. So the lay leadership there is doing a great job. Anyway, yeah, go worship with them.
Okay, that's part of our agenda on May 15th, hopefully, is to go up there for a worship service and then whatever feasting or whatever we do afterward. But Bible study is a good idea too. Pastor Zemer, put that up to you in terms of what do you think about a Bible study together?
Yes. I think that might take some preparation, Pastor Aaron. I think you and Pastor Andy, perhaps with Pastor Paul up there, so to brainstorm how that could be unique. So not fitting into the way we normally do Bible study, but what could they teach us from how they hear Scripture there? That could be enriching. I would wonder about a few years ago, Assembly Church of Wilderness led the worship service in.
Okay, Chris.
Yes, very moving in sort of their cultural background. I wonder there might be a certain time of the year like Rogation Sunday, which falls during Easter, or some date that might fit for Native communities where they might lead the worship, but really leading Trinity and challenging Trinity to be more creation focused and calling us to care for creation. And the authenticness they could do that, because this was their land for thousands of years before we arrived.
Yeah, even the idea of the word creator. You could have a whole Bible study around the word creator or creation, in terms of that. So, because we have our own European ideas of that, and they have a whole different history and background with the idea of creator and creation. So, even it's interesting, I think, when you go back and look at the creation stories, our creation stories, and you look at where their origin was and their creation stories. So there's a lot of similarities oftentimes in creation stories. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. I wrote that one down.
Is this church considered a mission church? Or is it history as a mission church? Like we have other mission churches?
Pastor, I'll go back to your Pastor Zemer, but I don't think so. I don't think it's a mission church. It's an independent ELCA congregation. Is that correct?
That would be great for people from Trinity sponsor a trip up to that museum. When you go up there, they have their Bible from the 1700s and they tell their story. I believe they've been a church for 200, maybe almost 300 years, but then they moved. They're forced out Massachusetts, and they were on their Trail of Tears too, of sorts. So Stockbridge comes from, they were settled east of Lake Winnebago, and there's still a Stockbridge village there. And then they were moved onto the Menominee area because they needed to find a way there. And they were a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod congregation. And then during the time of Seminix, Hugh, you would know that very well. That's when there's something in the way they were treated that they became part of the
was it ALC or LCA, one of the two?
No, that
or
other LCA, ALC, the breakout
ELEA?
Missouri Synod, and then they joined the ELCA, of course, became part of that.
Something in the Lutheran alphabet soup that became the ELCA.
Right, yeah.
I think it might have been because Missouri treated them more as a mission church. And when they joined the ELCA, we promised to help fund them so they could have their own independent pastor, which of course, as we often do, we sort of pulled the money back and they've been struggling. We haven't been faithful into some of those agreements back in the 1970s and 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to throw in another thing, they have been a little bit of everything. I mean, they were Anglican at some point, they were Presbyterian at some point, they're Missouri Synod at some point. But I think pastors have talked about in this 200-year history, they have remained steadfast in their Christian faith in terms of which I think is a lesson for us. Okay, got a lot of good ideas, which I'll put on our list, so. But I think it keys, this May 15th thing, I think is a big send off for that. I know Chris says she's going in and out, so, but she's back, so good. Okay, I'm going to go on to one thing that we can discuss too, because once I have some discussion here. Let's see, slideshow. And I'm not, let's see, okay, I'll do that from here. I shouldn't be talking to myself. This is something that the ELCA has put out, in terms of it. In 2016, they had this repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, saying that was a bad thing. And there's a new thing that came out, I think it was this year or last year, in terms of that. That is, they're reaching out to Native Americans. And these are two parts of that. Part of it was a confession that they put down there, and I highlighted that. We devalued indigenous religions and lifeways. We think of them as a minority, which it's interesting. I never really thought about that. Rather than a nation, they are sovereign nations, which we'll get to, I have a question about that later. How important the land is, and hopefully, if we have our Menominee speaker next week, he'll really talk about that. And the last thing I put down there, we have not yet taken action to live out the repudiation, not to do it too. It asks for a lot of things to be done, but as ELCA, this is our confession. We really haven't done very much. And the call to action I put up there, inclusion of the Indigenous history in K-12 curriculum. Well, Wisconsin has that. That's Act 31. It's supposed to be in the elementary grades, middle school, and high school. Now, how much that's applied, I don't know. I'm not in the public schools. But also develop future leaders, pastors, and theologians. For example, Trinity has a scholarship program that has helped people that are going into professional church work. I don't know if that's open to other congregational people. That might be something we could look into. And then there's the whole idea of the buyback and return of tribal land, to do that, because that's really a hot button issue, in terms of that. So we'll talk about this in a minute. There are Native American leaders today, and here's just a collage of people in Wisconsin that are Native American leaders, and I'm going to highlight two. There's this Jeff Bowman. He's a member of Stockbridge. He's president of the United Nation Bank, Bay Bank in Green Bay. And Green Bay and the Native Americans have had really, really a lot of expansion and a lot into businesses and so on. There's a lot of businesses that the Oneidas have there also to do too. And then this Winona Wolf, she works with the lieutenant governor, in terms of that. So there's a lot of things that she does. And there's a whole list if you go to the Chamber of Commerce for Native Americans to do that. But so we have people today. It's not that they're all huddled on a reservation, in terms of that. They're out there working, and some very, very impressive people in Native American leadership in our state. So I have a little talk. I have about 10 minutes left, a little left. Let's kind of summarize what's the most disturbing part in what you saw. How about the church? What was our good and bad things? How have they worked to overcome the barriers? Casinos, was that a good or bad thing? And how can our church respond to foster relationships? Okay, so that's just kind of questions. I'm just gonna stop that share and go wherever we want for this last few minutes. So what would you like to talk about?
I think one of the worst things was taking children off the reservation, putting them into anglicized schools, immediately cutting their hair, stopping them from speaking their language. Severe Christian people doing severely child abusive things to them in order to remove their culture from them.
Yeah, and that's one of the books I'm going to be taking up to the Muncie Stockbridge Guild. I don't think they have this book, and it's written by one of the teachers in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod's Mission School. And it's his whole perspective of this, how this happened and what they did. So. How about the casino question? So that's good or bad?
It's a really interesting conundrum, I find. So as most of you know, my first call was in International Falls, Minnesota, which is not far from the Boys Fort reservation for the Band of Chippewa. And Colleen Bernew, who now works for the Northeastern Minnesota Synod, lives on the reservation and is of Native descent, but doesn't have enough of the blood quotum to be considered a member of the tribe. And the way that she has talked about the casino that they have and what it does for the community, my understanding at least is that that money helps families the way that it's distributed, and it's not how it's often portrayed of oh yeah, you're just rolling in money because you have the casino, right? I think it's a really complicated issue that I think people have tended to oversimplify because we don't want to look at the reasons why the reservation is often the way that it is,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's just a show of hands. How many have ever been to an Indian casino? I haven't, so I've been by it, but I haven't been to it. So okay, interesting.
we had a church meeting there.
Did you?
It was on native land.
I know when I was in the Education Association, we met in Las Vegas because that was the cheapest hotels and the best food you could get, free food.
Yeah, nice lecture halls. I've been to a lecture there.
Yeah. Okay. So it is a conundrum, really to do it too, because there's so many, the money has helped, tremendously in terms of things. But when you go to the Muncie Stockbridge, it's not just a casino. They have a golf course and they have the Cottapot Lodge and a lot of kind of things that are happening too. So it's not just casinos. So. An interesting dilemma, Pastor, you can mull on this one. I was at a church in Chicago. Somebody put a winning lottery ticket in the offering plate, and the church council had to decide whether to cash it or not.
Nobody get any ideas, please.
Yeah. So any other comments and so on? Any of those other questions? I guess, where we're heading, do we think we're heading in the right direction? Are we getting a good basis here?
This cannot be patronizing, which is what happens after we start learning that we think, how can we help you? How can we help you? Because we think what we are here to help these people who always need something. We took so much from them, maybe just getting them back to how strong they were is what we might do, but they aren't coming to us and begging for help.
No. Yeah, I think that's a good place.
Thank you, Anita. I appreciate those comments as well. I just want to point this particular book out to you if you haven't seen it. It's titled Indian Nations of Wisconsin. It covers all of the tribal nations, and it is a very good read, and it's not a difficult book to tackle, but I would suggest it as a study group for your congregation, or invite others in your community to enter into this discussion with you outside of your own church. I did this, I participated through it was done through an organization of educators within Wisconsin. And even though I'm not active currently, I was in the past, and they permitted me in. And so it was led by the individual who heads the Native American Studies for the Department of Education for Wisconsin. Anyway, that was the book we worked with. So
okay, I'll add that to my resource list. So, and Pastor Zemer, thank you for that you're emailing. I'll add that also too. So
There's also
Did you know-
addition to that same book written by Patty Lowe. That's
Okay.
helpful.
When my husband was growing up in Wapaka, the priest at the Episcopal Church was a native pastor. His daughter is coming to do a talk at Winchester Academy about mascots. Native, how mascots are. And it's coming up in the next year. I can't remember when, but I can get that information. And so that might be a really interesting talk right here at the library to come to. So
Okay.
I'll add that on my to-do list.
Okay, just email me things. And Pastor had to leave and go to a church council meeting, so he's go with God, we'll say to Pastor. Any other questions? If not, I will close off with a prayer. So, Heavenly God, great creator, creator not only of the earth and us, but also creator of thoughts. We hope that you can instill some wisdom into us as we move forward to try to develop these relationships with our siblings. And also we thank you for the many gifts that they have given to us, not only in the past, but are doing right now. So we end this session with prayer and praise. In your name, go in peace and serve the Lord.